At least one of Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira will lose their MotoGP seat at Pramac Yamaha at the end of the year. Now, the keywords there are at least, and we will get to that. But even without that fun little twist, Miller and Oliveira have known for a while that it's one or the other to stay at the team with the arrival of Toprak Razgatlioglu, which is already confirmed. Now, Simon, you spoke to new Yamaha MotoGP boss Paolo Pavesio fairly recently about many things, including where Miller and Oliveira now stand in the picture.
The focus has always been, and it is, to help and support our riders as much as we can everywhere.
Yes.
We all have seen Jack Impact was very good in the beginning, and then he had some more difficult weekends, which is also part of the game. Everything is new. Miguel had a very early injury, so also is really, for sure, has delayed the adaptation to the bike. This is why we want to give a bit more of time, or let's say we need to use all the time we can to assess and to take a decision, which is anyhow not an easy decision.
Yes.
But it's normal, this is sport, and we've been transparent with the both rider. We spoke to them before announcing Toprak, of course. It was a sign of correct relation and respect, and that's the game. And they are all grown boys, and they know.
Now, Simon, that makes it sound like there's a straight fight, 1-2-1, mano-a-mano. I've had my suspicions for a while that maybe isn't necessarily the case, and recently we've heard that isn't the case.
Yeah, it's starting to sound that way. It's starting to sound like there is a bit of a wild card in this mix that fits a bit more with the, the ethos behind this Yamaha expansion into Pramac of making it a junior team to develop talent and move them up through the ranks, because it now suddenly sounds like a recent Moto2 frontrunner and arguably championship contender in 2025, Diogo Moreira, is suddenly in the mix as well, in a move that, presumably would see Miller and Oliveira go from being in a straight shootout against each other to suddenly both of them losing their seats to make room for this young Brazilian kid to come in and take over as Yamaha's future hope. We know that Yamaha have been quite interested in Moreira for a while. He's in the unusual position of riding a Kalex Moto2 bike at the minute for Italtrans, but already having a deal directly with Yamaha in his home country that provides him with training bikes and presumably a little bit of money as well. So they've taken an interest in him. He seems to be a name in the mix at the minute, and even though he's kind of doing the usual Moto2 rider thing of denying everything and saying that he's concentrating on his current championship, it's sounding more and more like there may well be a chance that we see him also in MotoGP in 2026.
We're going to have a lot of chances to talk about Diogo Moreira, I think, in the future, because when you're a near championship contender, or I'd say championship contender is fair, in your second season in Moto2, that's just a bright neon light that says, MotoGP future, whether it is in 2026 or in 2027. But the idea of Yamaha moving on from both of the experienced riders it's brought on is part of the mission to provide also the factory team with more data, provide Fabio Quartararo with more data. Fabio Quartararo, who increasingly sounds cranky again about the status of the Yamaha M1 project, as he tends to do when there's a run of bad races. It would be quite bold to anchor that project on a rookie and on another rookie in Razgatlioglu. However, there is, when you hear Pavesio, who has worked with Razgatlioglu in Superbikes, talk about his MotoGP potential, there is still a supreme confidence that it is a move worth taking, and there's so much confidence that potentially he could be paired up with a rookie.
I think 26 is also very important, because we will start, and everybody will start to understand. But no, this is clear. We don't have a specific result target, I think we are all aware that it will take some time. As much time, what is the landing point? We have expectations, of course, otherwise we were not doing this.
No, of course.
He has expectations, but also to manage these expectations will be important.
Do you see him has he changed in the time that he has been away from Yamaha? You said he's super mature about this. Is that something that he's growing into?
I think at the end, for sure, he has learned. Finally, he came to Superbike on a Kawasaki. He has learned a Yamaha. He has shifted to a BMW. First of all, he has already proven that he's a fast rider on different machines, because those three machines are really different each other. Then, if you see the way Toprak rides. Everybody speaks always about the stuntman part of it, and the funny that enjoyable style he has. It's nice to watch.
Yes.
But Toprak is a very precise rider. If you check how many times he had a crash because of a mistake, or a crash because of he was hitting somebody else. So he's so good, he's going on the edge, that I think the precision of his riding is underestimated.
Okay.
And then how he can apply those skills which have been growing over the years to the new challenge. This is the real open point, but for sure he has been growing. Also, he has been growing as an athlete.
Yeah.
When I met him, he was a talented rider. Today, Toprak is a professional rider, which is a different place to be.
Yeah.
Let's leave Moreira and Razgatlioglu out of it for now. One's already signed, one we don't know might be signed. Simon, pick between Miller and Oliveira if you're Yamaha right now.
I mean, it has to be Miller for me, simply because of the development credibility that he brings to the project right now. That's taken nothing away from Miguel Oliveira, but whenever we look back at the career that Jack Miller in particular has had, he spent an awful long time of that career not just riding different bikes and building up a good CV of experience with the best of and worst of various machines in MotoGP, but also being that guy in every one of his teams that kind of the development lead falls to as the other guys in the team race every weekend, if that makes sense. He had that role at Pramac. Whenever he was the third factory Ducati rider, he was the guy that got new bits first to run them on a race weekend to decide whether or not they were good enough to move to the factory team. Jack is the guy that almost single-handedly did all the early development work for both the front and rear ride height devices in MotoGP because of that. He had a similar role at KTM where he was the second fiddle to Brad Binder, but was the guy that did a lot of work and arguably improved the bike while he was there. And now at Yamaha, we see the exact same thing. He is clearly the number 2 rider within the team at the minute in regards to results. He's clearly the guy that is being given a lot of the lead time on development and stuff, and new parts coming through, both because he's very, very good at it, and because, as we've seen with other manufacturers in the past, other Japanese manufacturers in the past, you don't want the wonder kid that can ride around problems being the guy who gets to pick what direction your bike goes in. So Fabio Quartararo hasn't been given full leeway to build an M1 the exact way he wants to, because you need a little bit of common sense in the mix. You need a little bit of kind of, a leveling that I think Miller brings to the project. Oliveira doesn't have that same experience. He everything else aside, doesn't even have the same experience this season with the Yamaha because of all these injuries, because of something that, yes, is absolutely been out of his control. But unfortunately, in the harsh reality of MotoGP, that doesn't change the fact that he's had less time in the bike, he's had less time to adapt. He is, I would argue, based on what we've seen both here and in the past, someone that takes a little bit longer to adapt to a new bike than, say, Miller, who was immediately quick the very, very first time we saw him in the Yamaha at Barcelona test at the end of the year. So, as tough as it is, because I like seeing both of these guys in MotoGP, and I think they both have a role to play in MotoGP both now and in the future, I think it has to tip in favour of Miller.
I would like to offer a counter argument there, although it is part of it is also Miller is an Aprilia away from completing the full set right now, and there might be a vacancy at Aprilia to have a look at somehow, how. But yeah, I think the recent rounds specifically have really shaken my faith in terms of Miller being a shoo-in for a renewal. It feels like Oliveira is improving fairly consistently. The past couple of rounds, I think he has been the better Pramac Yamaha rider, which didn't seem too likely to start the season. So for me, there's a worry, firstly, that maybe Miller is already at the ceiling of what he can offer the project, whereas Oliveira can still break through it. But also, we should talk about the contractual situation. Miller's entered this season knowing he would be a free agent at the end of the year. Oliveira entered the season on a 2-year deal, one that does contain a clause that we believe Yamaha will be at liberty to activate to cut him loose after 1 year. But I think if it's much of a muchness between the two, the signal that you want to send to other prospective riders for you in the future is that, when it comes down to it, you will tend to honor those contracts. I think if it's 50-50, and for me it's increasingly looking like a 50-50, I would go with the guy who's already on the 2-year contract that doesn't require the contractual mechanism. But it is also important to say, the more we've seen of this season, the more attractive the case seems of just cleaning house. Because none of those guys are running with Quartararo. So I want to ask you this, Simon. Is that temptation understandable? Or, given also that Quartararo will feel good about having experience in the ranks, rather than having the second team being used as a test bed for potential future race winners, etc., would that be a mistake to try to immediately turn Pramac into this rookie project instead of continuing to reinforce with experienced riders and try to help through that?
One thing that we've seen all the way through all the big major changes that Yamaha have made to try and find their way back to competitivity over the last few months and years has been that they listen to what Quartararo wants. Fabio asks for something, Fabio gets it, be it a rider coach, a satellite team, a V4 engine. All of those things have come true because he's essentially demanded it. And I think that means that he probably has a fair bit of weight in helping them make this decision. And I think that you're right. I think that he's going to be someone that will tip in favor of wanting a bit of experience to keep the momentum of this project moving towards the right direction. He, at the end of the day, doesn't care about the future prospects of Yamaha after he leaves the manufacturer. He cares about him winning on this bike, and anyone else, including the guys we're talking about, he doesn't really matter because they're rivals. It's about looking out for number one. Beyond that, though, I think I'm going to get attacked from the internet for this, obviously, but I'm also not completely confident in bringing in Toprak as the future prospect for Yamaha. That's the flip side of this equation. Simply because of his age. He's going to arrive in MotoGP as a 30-year-old. It's going to take at least a season to adapt. It's not going to be a case of him being someone to deliver multiple championships for Yamaha once Quartararo has gone somewhere else or has retired or whatever. And Moreira potentially is that guy because, as we've seen, as you've already alluded to, Val, people who are very fast in their second year in Moto2 tend to go on to have a pretty successful MotoGP career. That's a very good metric for measuring MotoGP success. So there's a logic behind wanting to have a rookie who's not the other rookie, given the age of the other rookie. And that's a difficult decision that they're going to have to make, really.